no man is perfect, but all men are capable of doing the right thing.
Ain't that right? He ain't lying.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Alpha and Omega Exponent, where we share content to add value to your life. My name is Parfait, and we are continuing on our story time. So, the story of today is the story of a man who heard from God, of a man who listened to God, of a man who was blessed and found favor in the eyes of God, but the same man was found drunk and naked by one of his sons in his tent. This is the story of Genesis chapter 9. So, without any further ado, let us begin. But before we go forward with the story time of today, I'm going to give a quick recap of the previous story. And if you haven't watched the video of the previous story, I'll put a link down in the description below so you can watch it and then come back to this video to go forward with us. So, the brief recap is that there was a man named Noah who God gave a command to build an ark, and then he built that ark, and then God told him to take some animals with him and his family because he was going to wipe everyone, because there was just, the earth was filled with people who were doing their own thing, and it made God sad, it made God mad. And so Noah built this ark, took his family and animals in that ark, and then God made it rain for 40 days, and there were water over all the earth, and every creature, every living creature basically died. And so now, in the previous story, we learned about patience. We learned how God remembered Noah, and then God sent a wind to basically dry all the water on the earth. So let us go forward with the story time of today. And in verse 1 of the story, it says that, "And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." So what we can learn from this story is that there's a blessing after the favor of God. God blessed Noah and his sons after Noah found favor in his sight. And how did Noah find favor in the sight of God? Noah was a righteous man. Noah was a man who obeyed, who listened to the commands of God. God told Noah, build an ark. He went and built the ark. God told Noah, take all these animals with you in the ark and take your family with you. And he did so. And now God, in return, God blessed him. And so we learn that God will bless us for obedience and not for disobedience. And sometimes we ourselves, we block our own blessing because of our own disobedience and our own stubbornness by not listening to the command of God. So if we really want to be blessed, we must start living a life of obedience, a life where we are listening, we are putting things into action. Whatever God put into our heart to do, we must be obedient to those words and to that command. And at the same time, God tells Noah to be fruitful and to multiply. So God has given to us the ability and the strength to multiply in everything that we do. So there's already the strength to do so. We must be able to now enter into that purpose. And continuing on in our story, in verse 3, this is God speaking to Noah, and he tells him, he says, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. God tells Noah that I give you everything. And if you've been following our story, we learn that when God gives you a command, the command that God gives to us is so that we can fulfill the purpose that he has given to us. And at the same time, God also gives a restriction in order to keep us safe in everything along that journey of fulfilling our purpose. So what are the restrictions that God told to Noah in order to keep him safe in everything? And we see that in verse 4 and verse 6, where God is speaking to Noah and he tells him, but you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood. And in verse 6 it tells him, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. So these were the two restrictions that God placed on Noah, and those same restriction applies to our life, right? God does not want us to shed the blood of our brothers, to shed the blood of our sisters. And this, God had to tell Noah this because in the previous story where we learned that Cain killed his brother Abel. So God does not want that to be repeated all over again on the earth. So God placed a restriction here, and he tells Noah that you shall not shed the blood of any man, and you shall not eat any flesh with its life. Moving forward to verse 11 all the way to 13, God decided to establish a covenant with Noah and the earth. What is a covenant? Think of a covenant as basically a contract. So God decided to have this contract between him and Noah and the earth. And in verse 11, God is speaking and he says, I establish my covenant with you and with you that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. So this was the contract or the covenant that God established. And in verse 15, God is speaking again and he says, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. So God says that he will remember his covenant or his contract with us. What is the takeaway message for us in this story? The takeaway message is a question. And the question is, God will always remember us. But do we always remember him? Do we always remember to include God in whatever we're doing? Do we always remember to include God in our plan? Do we always remember to include God in our work? God wants to be included in whatever we have going on, and God must be included in whatever we have going on or whatever we want to do. Moving forward onto the second half of our story, this is where things become interesting. Beginning in verse 20, it says, Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk, and laid uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside. So, the same man, Noah, who found favor in the eyes of God because of how he lived his life, of how he was found righteous in the eyes of God, the same man, Noah, who obeyed the command of God, the same man Noah who was blessed by God, that same man one day got drunk and laid naked in his tent. And to make things even worse, his youngest son, Ham, saw him drunk and naked like that and ran outside and told his other two brothers. So what happens next? We see in verse 23, he says here that then Shem and Japheth saw the other two brothers, who they took a garment and laid it on both of their shoulders and walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their father, and their face were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So after Ham, the youngest son, ran outside and told his other two brothers that, hey, this is what I saw. The two brothers took a garment, walked backwards. They did not see the nakedness. They did not see the father naked, but they walked backward and they just covered him with a garment. So what happens next in this story? And we learn about it beginning in verse 24 all the way to verse 27. And it says that when Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. He also said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tent of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. So Noah woke up, found out that his youngest son, Ham, saw him naked. So Noah decided to curse someone. Instead of cursing his son, he decided to curse Canaan, his grandson, whose father was Ham. And he also decided to pass out some blessing because of the actions that took place. So Noah cursed his grandson Canaan instead of cursing his son who directly saw him naked, but he cursed his grandson. And he also blessed directly his son Shem and Japheth because of their actions by taking the garment and covering him. So what are the important key messages to take away based on this story? There are 4 important key messages to take away. And the first one is that sometimes we suffer as a result of the bad action and sin of our parents. As we learned and heard in his story, when Noah woke up and found out that his youngest son, Ham, saw him naked and drunk in his tent, Noah, instead of cursing his son, he decided to curse his grandson, Canaan. And so the takeaway message here is that in order for us to bring a blessing on our children as young people who will one day will become parents, it's important for us to live a life that will bring a blessing on our children. The second takeaway message is that do not shame people in their moments of vulnerability. Do not shame people when they're struggling. Do not shame people when they're suffering, but instead help them. And this is about understanding. And as we learn and heard in this story, when the other 2 sons heard about their father being drunk and naked in the tent, instead of them going out and blowing the trumpet, instead of them repeating what the youngest son had done by coming and spreading the news, they decided to take a garment and going and coming, and they went in their father's tent and did not see nakedness, and they covered him. So when people are in moments of vulnerability, when people are struggling, when people are suffering, instead of us blowing the trumpet about what they're experiencing, we have to be found it in our heart to be able to try to help them in any way that we can, because that's how we are blessed. The third takeaway message is that we are blessed because of our good actions. We are not blessed because of our bad actions. So in order for us to continue to live a life of blessing, we have to think about what are the good actions that we can take in order for us to continue to be blessed. And the last and final message, which is, I think, one of the most important message of this story, is that no man is perfect. As we learned and heard in this story, Noah, the same man who heard from God, the same man who found favor in the eyes of God, the same man who obeyed the command of God, the same man who was blessed by God, that same man one day got drunk and was found naked in his tent. That same man woke up, was upset, decided to curse his grandson, and decided to also pass out some blessing. And so what we see in this story is that the same man who had a close relationship with God is not perfect. The same man was not perfect. So the final key message is that no man is perfect, but all men are capable of doing the right thing. So as young men, it's important for us to live a life, to make decisions that are right, to make decisions that will help us to continue to grow into our purpose. So that's it for this message. I hope that it added values to your life. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.